Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, your host, registered dietitian, and intuitive eating counselor. And today I have on Esther Bursztyn. Hi, Esther.
Hi,
Thanks so much for coming on.
it's so nice to be here.
Yeah. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. Where do you live and what do you do?
Mhm. So I'm Esther Bursztyn. I live in Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm an eating disorder therapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and I am a certified eating disorder specialist. So therapist, majority of my work is with clients with eating disorders, but also other diagnoses, mood disorders, some personality disorders. I do a lot of DBT work.
Very
Um,
cool.
yeah.
Okay, amazing. So I'll just tell the listeners that I'm meeting you the first time tonight, but also I recently heard you speak at Rachel Goodman's summit for registered dietitians, specifically anti-diet like dietitians or therapists. So that was like you did such an amazing job. And I was like, I have to have you on the podcast. I want to hear your story. I want to hear how you got into this work. And did you always know that you wanted to be a therapist? Did you always know you wanted to work in eating disorders? Like tell us about your story.
Okay. So interestingly enough, I remember first having the thought when I was like 14 that I wanted to be a therapist. But I think like I was kind of like, nah, that's not gonna happen. I this came from a pretty yeshivish background and at that point in time, so what are we talking about? Over 25 years ago,
Hmm.
um, most people from yeshivish backgrounds weren't really going to college or school in any way. So it's kind of like, that's not gonna happen. But I remember having that thought at that point. I did not become a therapist immediately after school. I was a teacher for a while, a high school teacher. Then I took some time off when my kids were little. Um, and definitely had points in that time when I struggled with my own disordered eating stuff, and some kind of generalized mental health. And that kind of like set me in this place of, you know what, I want to go back to school. I do actually want to be a therapist. I want to do this.
Wow. Wow.
And I would say pretty much from the get-go, so right when I went to school for therapy, it was very much with this like I'm going to work with eating disorders. And that was partially um I would say one main reason actually. The biggest reason was that I had found in my own kind of journey that there were not a whole lot of people around,
Mm.
therapists wise, who treated eating disorders. And it really was a very, very, very big gap. And also, when therapists did not know about eating disorders, they did not know and do not know about eating
Yeah.
disorders. It's not like,
Yeah.
okay, you can kind of know and kind
Yeah.
of be helpful.
Yeah.
So it was a very big gap that I felt
Mm-hmm.
needed to be filled. So it was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you don't have to say exactly how many years ago that was, but you're saying you finished high school, you started teaching, and you in your head,
Mhm.
you were like, I guess it wasn't a thing that people did, went to like, I don't know, college, or they didn't go to like get their degree. What was that like?
Well, I think like from my own circles, I
Mm-hmm.
won't say that was like that for everybody. I grew up in Toronto in a very, very diverse community. I think from my particular background, college really wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the advent of, let's say, Jewish college programs did not happen until, let's say, I was back from seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, it was very like, there was the clepping, which I did. I kind of
Right.
got my bachelor's via clepping. I did
Right.
that thing, but then it was like, okay, I'm going to teach. Like that's what I'm going to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Um, Funny enough, when I finally did go back for my master's, I did not actually go to a Jewish program. I,
Mm-hmm.
went to a, regular program. I'm not specifically a Jewish cohort, but I think that was really like the thinking for me. And again, I was a teenager, so it was very
Right.
much like, oh,
Right.
that's not going to happen. Okay,
Right.
you know what? I like
Right.
so
Right. Did you like teaching?
I did for a time.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah, yeah, I understand.
I like teaching in general. I like giving over information. I like speaking, so I like that. I taught high school. I really did enjoy it. For the most part, I can't say I always did amazing with the discipline stuff that came up, and so ultimately, kind of left that after a little, after a few years.
Yeah. And then was it hard for you to go back to school though? Like at that stage of life, or do you just feel like super motivated and ready for a new stage?
I loved it. Like I'm the kind of person that I feel like if I could afford it, I would like just go to school my whole life.
Yeah.
I really, really loved it. It really like speaks to me. Like I like learning. I have a really competitive streak. So kind of, papers and tests and like I kind of go for that. It worked well for me. My kids were at like the age and stage that it worked. It worked out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I definitely had to, like, I couldn't do a full on, quick 2 year master's. I had to extend it closer to 3 years. But it worked for me. This was back, I did it between 2014 and 2017. So this was back at I guess I started around 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that there was a gap between like um there was a gap in the therapy world or therapists where you lived, I guess, that were treating eating disorders or treating it well,
Mhm,
I guess, let's say.
mhm,
Because you said like it's not like it's not like you kind of could treat an eating disorder. Like you got to really know how to treat an eating disorder and
mhm.
know a lot about it. Which is kind of sad because people like I'm a dietitian, I'm a registered dietitian, they don't teach really anything. I think people are just so afraid to like touch it, like there's just so much confusion around it. But how did you realize that there was a gap? Like were you looking, you don't have to share, but were you looking for treatment for yourself? Were you looking for somebody to sort of like work under? Like how did you recognize that gap so easily? Or
The gap was more for my own journey. And so I think like recognizing that there was really nobody. There was
Mhm.
really nobody in the community. Even right now, there's definitely a few more, but not nearly enough. It's
No,
still
no.
a huge.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the same as it was back then, but it's still definitely a gap.
Right. And okay, so when you said that you were like struggling with your own mental illness challenges or mental health challenges and with this disordered eating, did you know that I guess you knew it was an issue, or was it obvious to you? Did you grow up in a home that there was a lot of diet culture? Was it just the stress of having children? Because it doesn't sound like you had that in high school so much from what you shared so far.
Right. It was very obvious to me.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, like funny enough, I know that so many people like did grow up in homes with a lot of diet culture. I can't say I really did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's interesting because I definitely had a lot of like, in retrospect, there was a lot of my identity being tied to, I was always very small. I was small, I was tiny, and kind of like known as
Mm-hmm.
as such. So like I think that definitely, was a piece, but I was able to recognize it very quickly. It wasn't like oh, like is this even what's happening? There wasn't really any gray area I could kind of say. It was
Mm-hmm.
pretty clear to me, pretty quickly.
It's so interesting because, I mean, I know from my work and for myself that like many times when people are struggling, they don't even realize that they're struggling just because it's so reinforced in the world to be, small, skinny on a diet. So I guess there was an awareness piece for you, maybe because you didn't grow up with diet culture, that the way that, like how a diet sort of like pulls you in and you get like stuck there. So maybe
Yeah.
it was like obvious for you because you knew the difference
Mhm.
between maybe the way you were and the way, because so many
Yeah.
people struggle like it gets worse and worse as they get older, but
Hmm.
so then they don't even realize.
Exactly. Exactly. No, for me, it was pretty clear.
Okay, so then when you went to school, you knew you wanted to treat eating disorders, and did you specifically go to school as a therapist trained in eating disorders right away?
No.
No. Okay.
So I think that you mentioned something before about not learning anything about this really in
Yeah.
dietitian school.
Yeah.
The equivalent I was, in a regular clinical social work program. There was like
Yeah.
nothing on eating
Yeah.
disorders. And even like the few mentions that professors made of it, like I kind of would like roll my eyes. Like I had a
Yeah.
really hard time.
Yeah.
Um, I will say, I devoted a lot of my papers, research papers that I had to do for schooling, I devoted to eating disorders. So I did a lot of, I guess you could say, like my own self-education at that point in time throughout my
Hmm.
schooling.
Hmm.
Um, and then, so a lot of it at that point was my own kind of, working on things, developing things. My internship was in a fantastic place, Princeton House, which is Not specific to eating disorders. It's a DBT program. Well, one of their programs is a DBT program, and that's where I interned. And they really gave me some good leeway, I guess you could say. I developed and ran a group there on body image and
Mm.
intuitive eating.
Wow.
So I think that during my like schooling period, I just did a lot of my own research, education, all of that. Um, I will say I was also, and then after school, I immediately started IADEP's International Association of Eating Disorder Professionals. They have a certification program, which is pretty rigorous. So a decent amount of, firstly, educational modules and courses and instruction. There's about how many hours? I think it was 2,500 hours supervised eating disorder experience. That obviously took me time through my first few
Mhm.
years as a therapist to accumulate, case studies, exams, etc., like a typical certification course. So that's really, how I got to eventually becoming certified. But what I will say is that I had had some involvement on like volunteer basis with, running. I ran kind of like a semi like word of mouth kind of thing, support group for eating disorders. So I kind of was like gathering up experience in my own ways, such that when I graduated and got my first job in a clinic locally, I really just put it out there to them. I said, I can work with eating disorders. And they
Mhm.
were more than happy to send me any eating disorder case that came their way.
Mhm.
And then I think because there was such a gap and so few eating disorder therapists, then what happened was, and I did know some colleagues around here, did start sending to me. Um, I just kind of like developed kind of on the job, I guess you could say.
Mhm.
And that's really how I landed where I am now.
And this was on liquid, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So, so when did you start your private practice?
So I started my private practice. When did I start my? Oh, COVID. Um,
Wow.
I had been working for a couple of years at a clinic locally, and then I
Mhm.
joined a group practice,
Mhm.
private group practice here. And then, during COVID, I was, realizing I was working from home and
Mhm.
I like
Yeah.
and um had a lot of people constantly reaching out to me directly, and it kind of just felt like the right move. So I guess
Mhm.
I've been working in private practice now. I guess it's been about 4 years.
Wow.
Probably just under 4 years. Yeah, something like that.
Wow. It's been 4 years since COVID. That's crazy. So in the practice that you were working in before you switched to private practice, was it a practice? It wasn't just a eating disorder practice, I'm assuming. It was like everything, and you were the eating disorder therapist.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. And when you started working as a therapist that treated eating disorders, did you like that right away? Or was there anything that was like really shocking, really surprising, really scary? No?
No, nothing really surprising or shocking or scary. No, definitely
Mhm.
not. I did like it right away. And at the same time, I realized, after a little bit that it is hard, really, really hard work.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm definitely very, very, very passionate about it. And at the same time, like it's different than seeing a client with mild anxiety or depression,
Yeah.
right? There's
Mhm.
incredible investment of time and energy needed, a ton of collaboration, right, with dietitians,
Mhm.
doctors,
Mhm.
psychiatrists, parents.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that it's, I definitely learned a lot on the job in terms
Mhm.
of like, okay, like how can I manage that differently? How can I do that differently? So it wasn't so much about, I guess you could say, it wasn't so much about symptoms or presentation that I learned, but it was more so about um, trying to find the right words here. Um, the collaboration piece and managing the complexity of all the different pieces that could show up, right?
Yeah.
And then if somebody's coming to me with so many different comorbidities, maybe they have an eating disorder, maybe they have severe PTSD, maybe they are suicidal also and self-harming,
Yeah.
like kind of like managing all the pieces, what comes first, what comes second, where do
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
and then is this a person who's appropriate for this level of care? When do I know that they need to go to a higher level of care? So a lot of that.
Yeah. It is very heavy, heavy, heavy work.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask you, would you mind sharing, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, but would you mind sharing what you shared when you spoke for Rachel Goodman's thing about what you said about kind of like symptoms of abuse? I know that like that was pretty like technical, but I just thought it was actually mind blowing when I heard you say that, and you explained it so well. I actually explained it to a bunch of my clients afterwards. I like took notes. So just so you know, I thought it was really, really good.
Sure. So which part, and I'm totally gonna have to pull out my paper
Sure.
because
Yeah,
I
no
like
problem.
which part?
Um,
So you're talking about like the first part where I was just kind of talking about how different kinds of abuse and how like that one might show up in like terms of body image.
yes, exactly. That's exactly.
That part. Okay,
Yeah,
just wanted to check.
yeah,
So
yeah,
hold on, because
yeah,
I
sure.
have to pull this up briefly because I
Yeah,
just want to make sure that I'm really running through it thoroughly.
sure, no problem. I actually think that like I guess we could discuss it afterwards, but maybe it would be something I would put on my website as like a little blog. Obviously, I would quote you, but
Mhm.
it's like, do I have a book here in my office? It's like it's the lady who wrote it. I can't remember the name of the book, is a yoga instructor and she's also a therapist. Do you know what I'm talking about? And she talks a lot. I think it's called Embodying Your Body, something like that.
Mhm.
And um I think that that comes up a lot with clients that like because whatever happened to them, whether it was sexual abuse or physical abuse or verbal abuse or anything, that just makes them feel a lot of like self-loathing, whether it's about their body or not about their body. Um, People just don't understand the connection between that and eating or not eating, which is so
Absolutely.
interesting, you know? So,
100%.
so like, yeah, they're so connected, but people just can't see the connection, you know?
Yeah, and the more I do this work, the more I see the connection, honestly. Like it just shows up all the time where, we're restriction besides for potentially being about body image and wanting to lose weight or whatever it is, it's also a way of avoiding the pain or
Yeah,
dissociating from the pain. Like there's
yeah.
so many functions to eating disorders,
Hmm.
essentially, and to disorder
Hmm.
symptoms. But absolutely. So I can totally go through this. So
Amazing.
what I was really talking about, what you're referencing, my presentation there was briefly about like the trauma, obviously. And I was talking about how trauma can really impact a person's relationship with their body in a variety of different ways. And I was just highlighting, and obviously this is just like a few nitty
Yeah,
gritty points. Like
yeah,
I was really just highlighting like a few of the very obvious and like classic ways that these things show up. But I think also like I do want to throw out there like there's so many other types of traumas that I'm
hmm,
not talking
hmm,
about over here even.
hmm,
I think it's just like a little sampling.
hmm.
Um, okay, so one of the things I talked about how a person who's subjected to physical abuse experiences bodily harm and associated pain, and this can lead to negative feelings about the body, potentially seeing it as weak, shameful, vulnerable, bad, or unwanted. Right. With sexual abuse, a person can experience disconnection and dissociation from the body during the abuse. This can lead to disoriented or distorted body image or a sense of disconnect from self. And then the objectification that occurs along with sexual abuse can also lead to high shame about one's body, as well as feelings of guilt or a sense of being dirty or disgusting.
Right.
With emotional and verbal abuse consisting of constant humiliation and criticism or neglect, that can lead to overall low self-esteem and higher judgment about oneself, including the body. Bullying has similar effects, and if bullying is related to a specific physical attribute, there will be especially high negative beliefs about that. And finally, illness, injury, or other traumas that cause bodily or physical impacts, such as disfigurement, scars, pain, weight changes, can lead the person to view the body as untrustworthy or undeserving.
Amazing. And so you said five things, I think, right? Physical, sexual, verbal,
Physical,
bullying.
emotional, verbal, which I kind of put together, and then I talked about illness, injury, and other kind of physically impacting traumas. So that could include so many different
Yeah.
things.
So would you what percentage of your clients would you say have overlap with those categories? Probably all of them.
Most,
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 right? Right? Yeah, it's
Absolutely.
crazy. It's one of those crazy things that people don't think eating disorders in terms of like real trauma, right? You think I mean, we know like as dietitians that like many people who develop eating disorder, it did start with a diet. Obviously, it doesn't mean the diet caused it, but there's so much behind that led to an actual eating disorder because eating disorders are just really the symptom of something else, you know? So,
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say every single client has
right.
trauma, but I will definitely say the large majority does. From my just from my own observations
Yeah.
and practice.
Yeah. Are there any common, besides for that, are there any other common themes that you see with your clients that have eating disorders?
Themes as in like are you talking about, like diagnoses, or like what do you mean by themes?
Like, let's say, for example, let's say, like their mother was on a diet, or
Mhm.
let's say, they had a friend that was hospitalized for having eating disorder,
Mhm.
something like that. Like
So
anything.
I don't, obviously it's going to be different, but there's
Mhm.
definitely like a lot of people showing up to my office whose mother or father or both or older sister or whoever or whole family always was on diet, right?
Mhm.
Or who they themselves were on a diet since they were, however many years old. There's trauma. There's definitely a lot of overlap with like anxiety, OCD, or even just very, very rigid, perfectionistic,
Mhm. Mhm.
personality traits in general. That really depends on the diagnosis, though. So that would be more like what I was talking about right now. That might be a more like classic anorexia restrictive client versus, somebody with bulimia wouldn't necessarily have those specific, personality types. Again, this is all like there's no hard and
Yeah.
fast rule, but
Right.
if we're talking about like themes, these are things that I might see.
Got it. And in terms of intuitive eating, um, like when were you exposed to the concept of intuitive eating? Did you think it was a little crazy out there? How do you feel about intuitive eating?
No, I never thought it was crazy or out there. I think because I love the concept of intuitive eating. I would say I was exposed to it. When did I first hear the term? Probably like 12 years ago or so. So before I, went back to school, maybe 12, 13 kind of years ago. It doesn't sound crazy to me at all. I think though, partially because like I'm not one of those people who like had just been exposed to diet culture my whole life. I am
Right.
lucky in that way and really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
So of course diet culture had seeped in somewhat, and with my own, struggles, there had been like kind of, those kind of stuff had come up, but intuitive eating didn't sound crazy to me at all.
Mhm.
It's interesting, the more that I'm in this world, the more I realize how crazy it sounds to so many people,
Yes. Yes.
which is the funny part. Like it didn't
Right.
sound crazy to me initially, but now it's like, oh my gosh, like people really think this is nuts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. People think it's us. I know we were talking before about this intuitive eating group that a lot of from clinicians are in, and I
Mhm.
remember so I've been an intuitive eating counselor for about 5 years. So I've been in that group for about 5 years,
Mhm.
and I remember, and this still happens sometimes where people are like, "Did you see that article? Did you see that this?" And I would write, and somebody else would write like, "Wait a second, am I the crazy one, or are they the crazy one?" Because you really start to think like
Yeah.
that's not normal. Like, how are they writing that? Like, I remember a few years ago, there was an article in like a dating column about a girl who said like she's okay with her weight, but she knows that she should lose weight because everybody's telling her that she should lose weight. And every single person on the panel, it was like a panel discussion, was like, yeah, um, it's slim pickings, and you gotta just play the game, sorry. And everybody obviously wrote back, like people who like are on my side wrote back and was like, how could you say that, blah blah blah. But it's like, what, like, how did
Yeah.
you publish that? Like, but it was published, like it wasn't, and I'm sure it will be published again. Like I really do sometimes think, I mean, I feel like maybe because people know that eating disorders is a real thing, and like they don't know that health at every size is a real thing, or they think like, of course it's not healthy to be anorexic and to be below weight, but like overweight,
Right.
like but you got to be careful you don't become overweight.
Right. There's so much confusion. This actually reminds me of, talking about Rachel Goodman's summit that she made. It reminds me of Dina Cohn's
Yeah.
pipe cleaner
Yeah. I
theory,
love that. Yeah.
which is fantastic because I think
Yeah.
that so many times, like, yeah, of course, eating disorders are unhealthy, but
Right.
they don't realize like that
Yeah.
spectrum. And they don't realize
Yeah.
that it's not like, okay, eating disorders are here and we're over here. Like
Right.
it's no.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the thing that keeps me like, I will say, yeah, sometimes I'm like, wait, like there's so many people who think that way, and then so many fewer of us who think
Yeah.
this way. So am I
Yeah.
crazy? But I think the
Yeah.
thing that keeps going is that when I have people walking into my office and they've been doing this diet thing for years and years, and not talking about clients with eating disorders right
Mm-hmm.
now, right? Maybe this is
Mm-hmm.
more clients with disordered eating and just
Mm-hmm.
generalized around body image. And I kind of see them coming in, right? And they've been getting the same advice for years and years and years and years. And all it's caused them is immense pain and suffering. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, like I'm
Right.
not crazy, right?
Right,
This,
right, yeah, yeah. Yes, that's what I tell myself also. Like I have that sometimes where I'm just like whatever, feeling questioning myself because we all do. And then yeah, I'll have a client like that or a client who's like, a client just yesterday, she took a video, I posted it on my Instagram. She like threw out her scale. And it was hard for her and I get it totally. She was like, "Nah, I don't know, I don't know." And then she did and I was like, why? Why do you need your scale? Like, and then I think people take that as like, who cares about your health? Of course not. Of course we care about your health, but like, has weighing yourself ever helped you? No, it's made you obsessive. It's made you feel horrible about yourself. It's made you binge. It's made you restrict. Like I don't know. Nobody seems to see the writing on the wall. It's one of those things.
yeah. I will say I do feel like maybe this is me just being like minutely hopeful.
Okay. Please.
I do feel like over the last little while, it feels like people are like these messages are starting to get out there just a bit more. There's
Hmm.
still so much diet talk and so much diet culture, but the messages are getting in there a little more. I will say I had a pretty heartening experience recently. I have two girls in high school. And um, let's just say there's often things for me to not be happy about when it comes to diet culture.
Yeah.
But anyways, one of my children got an assignment from a teacher, and it was really meant as more of like a statistical thing. But some of the questions I found like were really like not worded well and kind of sounded pretty diety.
Hmm.
And I called the teacher up, and she was like so, so, so open.
Well,
So open to just like, okay, how do I frame these things the right way? I know she's like, I kind of know these concepts, but I don't know how to like word them or how to say them. She was incredibly open to just hearing
well.
and giving over well. So that was like a really, you know, like I said, heartening experience to
Yeah,
have.
yeah. That's very good to know. I was gonna say, like, I don't want this to be like negative, really. Like, what do
Mhm.
you see what do you see in your clinical practice or just in Lakewood? I don't really know anything about Lakewood. I know that's really funny. I live in the Five Towns and I've been to Lakewood only for like a few things, including like the last RD. There was a RD thing there a few months ago. I wasn't able to come to the
Mhm.
Rachel Goodman thing. It was just really, really, really far from Woodmere, but I was there
Mhm.
online. um yeah, so what do you see? Like, do you see that people are more receptive to intuitive eating? Do you see that, like, I know eating disorders are just so sad that I'm wondering if like people in, not just Lakewood, whatever, in the frum world, even in the non-Jewish world, do you think people are getting the message more? Do you think that there's more we could do as clinicians or even just as people who are not clinicians? Like, what do you see is going on currently?
It's a really good question. I don't know that I really have the capacity to answer that because I'm not somebody who's like so out there. I
Hmm.
don't put myself out there very much, even though I would like to educate, but ultimately I kind of do my clinical work. So
Hmm.
most of what I'm seeing is just who's coming into my office, and the people who are coming into my office are the people who are struggling, right?
Right,
So I
right.
can't necessarily say that. Even like I can't speak fairly to like the broad population. I do think people are becoming more aware. Like, let's say when it comes to eating disorders, people are more aware and want to help more and do more. I
Hmm.
just don't know that they always have the right like education. Like there is a lot more. I would even say there's a lot more support right now for
Hmm.
people with this community who have eating disorders. There's people who volunteer time to do meal support, things like that. And there's definitely a lot of people who want to help. Um, I don't. I think that what's missing is kind of, okay, so how can we educate effectively, right? A large
Mm-hmm.
number of people who can really, really, really be adequately supportive and supportive in the right way. Um, and not the right like I feel like, it's all very nice for me to sit here and say that when I'm not
Mm-hmm.
actually actively doing something
Right.
about it,
Yeah.
besides for the work that I do in my office. But
Right.
these are just kind of like my generalized, like, what I'm seeing.
Right.
Um, so I do think there is more awareness. I
Mm-hmm.
do think people are recognizing more like the impacts maybe of like severe dieting and constant dieting, but at the same time, there is still a lot of it
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. I I struggled with my own disordered eating as a teen in high school, and I actually do teach high school high school right now, just this year.
Do you want to come to
And
Lakewood?
no, no, I'm good. I'm good here in Woodmere. But no, it just like it brings me back to actually today I would teach on Wednesdays. It just brings me back to high school, which I'm 33, so I graduated like I don't know 15 years ago, 16 years ago. It's just like in a way I feel like we know so much more, and in a way I feel like it's gotten so much worse. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like we know so much more. And I know when I tell this to people all the time, when I was in high school, we had somebody come in to speak to us who had severe eating disorder in when she was in high school. But
Hmm.
she told us all about her symptoms and about how she like, lost her period and needs like laser hair removal. But at the end of the day, we were all like, hey, teach us your ways. I know that the school didn't know that that's like not what you should do because nobody knew. But
Hmm.
but so now we know so much more and we have so much more knowledge in the eating disorder field. But I still think that diet
Yes.
culture, has taken on a different role, I guess, wellness culture. But it's just, I don't
Hmm.
know, it's just so everybody's always like, is this healthy? Is this healthy?
Yes.
Is quinoa better than brown rice? Is 1200,
Yes.
and I'm just like,
Yes.
wait, what's going on here?
I think that's a really good way to describe it. I think that's exactly it. Like there's definitely more knowledge and more information, but definitely like a ton of diet culture, a ton, a ton, a ton. And you're right. Like sometimes masking
Yeah.
itself something other than what it is,
Yeah.
right? But like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, among the high school girls, it's kind of like what? Like, it's not normal to eat anything other than a
Yeah.
salad for
Yeah.
lunch.
Yeah.
Um, like that's normal eating, and that's
Yeah.
not. They don't
Right.
realize.
Right. Yeah. People don't realize that for sure. For sure. Interesting that you said that just because you said about your daughters in high school. I do think, tell me what you think about this, but I think that like a lot of moms will ask me or they'll call me frantically, like, somebody called my daughter fat or somebody said something about
Mhm.
dieting, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
And guess what? You're not going to shelter them from diet culture. They will be exposed. You
Mhm.
need to like strengthen yourself, strengthen your home. The children get like the most about values from you, your value system. So I think that like we could educate parents and we could also educate ourselves and try really hard to, you know, explain, not even just explain, live by our values, right? Because children know our values whether we say them or not. Um, but diet culture is out there. You know what I mean? Like I don't think it's going away. I really don't.
Right. Yeah, I do think that's a really big one. It's kind of like just giving our own children the education that they need. And
Mhm.
ultimately, we can't. I mean, it would be really nice if I could like change everything about the world that I didn't
Right.
like. That would be
Yeah.
cool. But ultimately, we really can't protect ourselves from that.
Right. Right.
I mean, I
Yeah.
think about that in the work that I do with my clients all the time, right? Like there's always this balance between obviously we don't want to like expose ourselves to unnecessary triggers, but at the
Right.
same time, and this could be in any realm, not just eating disorder, but at the same time, we also have to like be able to face triggers
Right.
because
Right.
they will be there. And so if
Yeah.
I am going to teach myself to just not have any triggers, then ultimately what I'm doing is I'm shrinking, shrinking, shrinking my life to a really,
Right.
really, really tiny little box.
Right.
Versus the reality is there are those triggers out there and
Right.
I've got to learn. Obviously, there's,
Yeah.
obviously a dance
Yeah.
to learn
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get there. But
Yeah. I think you said this actually in the summit, and which was really helpful. Um, and I've heard this from other supervisors that I've worked with, but the way you said it was just really easy to digest, actually. Um, that you said like when you're working with a client on a trigger food, don't pick the thing that's like 80% like triggering, right? You said like pick the thing that's triggering like 30%, which is I've definitely learned that maybe Dina Cohen taught me with like dosing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you wanna make sure there's like the right dose of like trigger, but not obviously too much where the client cannot handle it. Which I thought was really good. Like I do this sometimes with clients when we're doing like making peace with food from the intuitive eating process,
Mm-hmm.
that like you need to pick a trigger food, right? You can't just pick like an apple because it's your safe food,
Right.
although like yeah, sometimes, but you maybe don't pick ice cream, full fat ice cream. So I think that's helpful for people to know that like when you are working through um like the intuitive eating process, that like you don't have to like walk into the lines, then let's just say like you don't have to
Right.
like walk into a bakery and order every single thing, but you also maybe shouldn't just like, I don't even want to say fruit because I feel like fruit's really triggering for some people. Like maybe just don't try the salad with like, a teaspoon of dressing because like that's not such a trigger.
Yeah. And I think that what happens is when a client can approach a fear food, right? Say it's the one that's kind of 30 on this subjective units of distress scale, right?
Hmm.
So it's 30. And when they can expose to that, and exposure, right, we require consistency, but when they can expose to that consistently over and over and actually see their fear come down around that, that gives them like a huge boost of encouragement to then go on to the next thing. So it's not just like, okay, I'm doing this thing at 30, but then I'm going to have to do this thing at
Right,
80. No, because that thing at 80 might actually come down lower because what's
right,
happened is I've actually seen like, wait a second, like this can actually work.
right,
Um, and so I think that's the thing also, like I don't have to, like the way out of my fear is not to just avoid it, like my fear
right.
can actually come down.
Right. Yeah. I've just learned that over the last few years working with clients with eating disorders or just disordered eating,
Mhm.
not just, but like an example that I give a lot is like, let's say a client has like struggled with like social anxiety and she'll use food to help her. She'll eat instead of having to schmooze with somebody, right? So I would
Mhm.
tell her something like, before you start eating, wait 60 seconds, and she's like, oh, I hate you, Ela, and I'm like, okay, man, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, doesn't matter, but whatever you could tolerate. And when they leave me and they are hating me, when they come back next week, I'm like, how was it? Not so bad, like, right, it was not so
Mhm.
bad, right? Like, and that's just, I always tell this to people that like these skills are just amazing, powerful life skills in general. Like I say, like, exposure therapy and pain tolerance, exposure therapy and pain tolerance. Like it sounds like
Mhm.
simple when I say it like that, but like you can, with anything, whether it's a fear food or whether it's like a fear person that like triggers you, like you
Mhm.
can tolerate it even for, let's just say it's 15 seconds, but that's better than yesterday.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, habituation is real,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Into our emotions. And also, the very thing that actually reinforces our fear is avoidance. So the more
right,
we're avoiding something, the more that fear grows. Like that's just the way it works. And
right,
so, I mean, like, I'm a big believer in exposure in general, whether it's around food, whether it's around fears, whether it's around whatever it's around. I am a really big believer in it because it works
right,
if you're doing
right,
it correctly. Like it has to
right,
be done correctly. And
right.
there's a lot to that.
Mhm.
But it does work.
Yeah, totally. Um, okay, is there anything else that you would want to like leave the listeners with? Is there any like, I like, obviously you have to, I'm not sure what you're allowed to share, but is there like a story that you could leave us with like a client that had a really big breakthrough, or even yourself or a friend, or anything? I like to ask that question because sometimes they're like, these are like the really inspiring things that keep us going.
Yeah. I can't think of a story, off the top of my head. Like with clients, I wouldn't share. And then as far as, like I can't think of something to share off the top of my head. What I will say is that my clients are the most amazing people in the world. Like they really, really, really challenge themselves and change and work through immense, immense pain and hardship and struggle. And I think that when they're recovered, their relationship with food is so much better
Yeah.
than the person who's never been through what
Yes.
they've been through. So I will say that they're incredible people. I will say there is so much hope. Sometimes people kind of are like, that's it, eating disorder, it's a life sentence, I'm stuck
Right.
here.
Right.
There is hope. It is absolutely possible to recover. And sometimes it's painful and long and requires really hard work, but it's 100% possible to recover. Um, And yeah, like I've met some pretty amazing people in this process.
Yeah, I do think that people who recover from eating disorder are really the strongest people. Like they really, and like you said, with their relationship with food, like it's not like an addiction to it's not an addiction, but I'm saying it's not like an addiction to drugs or alcohol that you don't need. Like you need to learn how to eat because you will not live if you don't eat, right? So it's
Mhm.
like basic science that if like you don't have a good relationship with food, like your life will have a poor quality of life because you need to learn how to eat, you know?
100%, 100%.
I did actually just want to ask you something now that you said that.
Yeah.
Do you notice that with eating disorder clients or people in general, like maybe just people that you know, like do you notice that they're more like like the Enneagrams, like um personality types, like do you just notice that they're more like deeper thinkers or they just feel pain more in general, or do you not see that pattern with clients? I'm curious.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't, to me that's like so like individual because I
Yeah,
could say that about a lot of my clients with eating disorders, but I could also say that about my clients without eating disorders. So
right.
like I always have had a handful of clients without eating disorders. So
Hmm.
like I think that it's very individual.
Yeah,
Definitely I will say like a very large portion of my clients, I would say, are very deep thinkers and deep feelers and very empathetic and intuitive and perceptive. Like
right.
I definitely think that those are, yes, like qualities that I see a lot of
Hmm.
um in my office. But I don't know like the
Percentage
percentages,
wise, yeah,
what I
yeah,
would say,
yeah. I love percentages, by the way. I will just say for myself, if this is helpful for anyone listening, that like when I started doing this work, like intuitive eating, well, like when I was like on my own journey of recovery with intuitive eating, I started reading like all these like self-help books and personality type books, like the Enneagrams and the Four Tendencies and just like things like that, that like, and anyways, I'm a four on the Enneagram, if you're wondering. So fours love to like analyze people and themselves, whatever. So, um, what I've told the clients is that like I used to feel a lot of like, either shame or just upset about the fact that I'm like one of those types of people that feel things so deeply because like then you have to feel things so deeply. And like, like I talk about this with clients sometimes, like, those people that are just like, yeah, whatever, I missed the bus, like whatever, it's fine. Like what? You just spent your whole day like organizing to meet the bus. Like, what do you mean it's okay? And they're like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, I'm so jealous of you. Like, why are you not crying right now? And they just don't care. Like they just don't. Like, how should I meet them like that? So I've just found that like we sometimes just know learning that about ourselves and like learning that like that's just that the reason why it's really hard for you to feel that you just got into a fight with someone and now you're restricting because it's just like you really are feeling your pain more than somebody else, and that really is hard to feel.
Yeah, no, that's for sure true. And I think that so I don't know Enneagram so much, but I'm thinking about the Myers-Briggs, which I've done multiple times and always landed out with the same result, the
Okay.
INFJ. So anyways,
Okay, I have
uh,
to look into that because so many people are like, what about that one? I'm like, yeah, but I just know the Enneagram, so I have to look into that one.
but either way, like definitely. And I think that like what I'm always like, you know, I think sometimes people come in and they're like, but I should be like this, but that would be
Right,
the perfect me. And
right,
it's like, wait, but like we're given the traits and yeah, like our traits have their upsides and downsides. They do,
right,
right? So the
right, yeah,
fact that I feel things really deeply, which I do, can be very hard in a lot of ways. But at the same time, it so much allows me to connect to other people and relate to other people and do the work that I do and be empathetic and like it connects me to people, right?
Mhm.
And so the reality is, yeah, like our personality traits, they have their upsides and downsides, but I think like learning to just like love them and
Right,
like this is who I am and part of who I am. This is what makes me who I am. That's a really big piece of, I think, work for a lot of people.
yeah, totally, totally. Okay, so are you accepting new clients?
That answer changes like day to day. I
Okay.
would say currently I probably have like availability for like, maybe one new client.
Hmm.
Um, it varies really because if I have a client shifting from 2 sessions to 1 session, if I have a client going to residential or coming back from residential, like there's so many different, pieces
Hmm.
that I would say it's always worth a shot. And what I do is if I am not accepting new clients, I do leave that on my voicemail.
Okay, great. So I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna leave your information there. And if you live in Lakewood, you said, but are there other eating disorder therapists slash dietitians slash professionals that you trust that you could share?
Yeah, there's definitely people here in Lakewood. There's Daniela Feldman. She's an eating disorder therapist. There's Pessy Rajas.
Never heard of her.
There is Bracha Halberstadt.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, those are the people off the top of my head that are like local in Lakewood. There's definitely other so those are all therapists. Dietitians, we definitely have more. There's Dina Cohen and her whole
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
There's Aliza Wallach.
Lisa. Yep.
Um, and then there's definitely some people who do more of like maybe not so much eating disorders, but more of like the intuitive eating approach. So there's Rachel Goodman, of course. There's
Mm-hmm.
Rahi Stafford. There
Mm-hmm.
is Sheba Alone. I
Yeah.
hope I'm not missing anybody because I'm feeling like so. There's definitely like dietitians, and then as far as therapists, there's people like kind of a little farther out of the area as well, or also like not like within the community per se. Um, I feel like I was going to say something and I don't remember what, but that's okay.
That's okay. You could let me know and I can put it in the show notes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And I really
Oh, I
appreciate,
know what I was going to say.
tell me.
One other thing that I do offer is I do offer consultation for therapists.
Oh,
So
okay.
besides for like direct client work, I do offer consultation, and that is something that kind of like I've really like developed a fondness for recently. So, and also because it's not the kind of thing that necessarily needs to be very consistent every single week, I do try to fit that kind of thing in if it comes up. So putting that out there as well.
Okay, great. So a therapist who could use like, let's say supervision or not.
Yeah, I don't call it supervision because I mean, typically I'm not accredited as a New Jersey supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
I more so call it consultation. So if they want to I guess my like pickiness with the words there, but if they want to consult on a specific case or consult multiple times because they're starting to see more eating disorder clients and could use some support with that, that's definitely something I offer.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your expertise. And I really, really, really learned a lot from you. And I know other people will. And it was great to have you on.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice meeting
Okay,
you.
you too. Have a great night.
You too. Bye bye.